He no longer had the strength in his fists. His legs trembled, his voice weakened, but in that instant, before the entire world, Muhammad Ali raised the Olympic torch as if it were a champion's final blow. Muhammad Ali has always been synonymous with strength, speed, and courage. Inside the ring, he seemed unbeatable, a man who danced as lightly as the wind and struck with the fury of thunder. Outside, he was a symbol of resistance, justice, and the voice of a people. But behind this legendary image lay a silent, invisible, and cruel enemy, an enemy no punch could defeat: Parkinson's. As the disease began to advance, it robbed him of what the world admired most: his agile body, his firm gestures, his powerful speech. Still, Ali refused to let himself be defeated by the condition that weakened him year after year. The impact was devastating. A man who had always defied presidents, wars, and prejudices now needed help even to hold a glass of water. The contrast was painful. His fans, accustomed to seeing him roar like a lion, now witnessed the trembling in his hands, the forced silence of his voice. But even in the face of fragility, Ali found a way to maintain his dignity. He transformed his pain into a symbol. He showed the world that greatness lies not only in the strength of muscles, but in the strength of the soul. And that was precisely what exploded before the eyes of millions in 1996. On that day, as the lights in Atlanta dimmed and silence filled the stadium, a man scarred by illness re-emerged as a giant. Muhammad Ali, weakened but immortal, lit the Olympic torch and proved that the flame of courage never goes out. This scene was not just a sporting moment. It was the eternal image of an icon, the reminder that Ali's fight never ended in the ring, but in real life, where every tremor turned into resistance and every look into inspiration. It was the early 1980s when Muhammad Ali began to sense something was wrong. It wasn't a punch he'd received in the ring, nor a younger, faster opponent, nor even the natural fatigue of age. It was something different, silent, subtle, yet disturbing. His fingers trembled for no reason. His speech, once firm and incisive as thunder, seemed to stall on certain words. To many it might have gone unnoticed. But to Ali, who knew every fiber of his body like a general knows his army, it sounded like a grim warning. At first, no one wanted to believe it. It's just fatigue, the result of so many fights, the doctor said. You've been through a lot, you need to rest, insisted family members. But deep down, Ali felt that the upcoming fight was unlike any other. He who had already defeated giants like Foreman and Liston was facing an invisible, treacherous adversary who attacked from the inside out. An enemy who respected no rules, no rounds, no referees. Once, during an interview, he tried to lift a glass of water. The simple gesture turned into embarrassment when his hand wouldn't comply. The audience noticed. The cameras recorded it. But Ali kept his gaze steady. He didn't apologize, didn't show weakness. He simply silently swallowed the frustration of someone who had always been seen as indestructible. It was as if he were saying to the world, I'm still here, I'm still me. The diagnosis came like an unexpected punch in the gut. Parkinson's disease, a degenerative, progressive, and incurable disease. The champion who had so often proclaimed himself the greatest of all time now received a news that, little by little, he would lose control of his own body. The impact was devastating, but what was impressive was his reaction. Instead of hiding, Ali decided to face the disease head-on with the same boldness with which he faced his rivals in the ring. He didn't deny Parkinson's, he faced it head-on. God gave me this disease to show me that I'm not just muscles and speed. I'm more than that. This phrase, repeated in interviews, sounded like a creed. It was the reflection of a man who refused to be seen only as a victim. There, he transformed his pain into a banner. He didn't want pity, he wanted respect. At family gatherings, when the silence was heavy and everyone avoided mentioning the disease, he was the one to break the tension. You know I'm still handsome, right? He would say, eliciting laughter and soothing hearts filled with fear. This humor, this courage, were his way of fighting. Not against Parkinson's itself, but against the hopelessness that could destroy him. From within, even weakened, Ali continued to go out, to appear at events, to be seen by the public. Every tremor, every difficulty in moving, every slurred word was played out before the cameras, not as a spectacle of pain, but as a silent message. A true champion is measured not only by victories, but by the dignity with which he faces inevitable defeats. And yet, behind that brave smile, there were long nights of silence. There were quiet tears, shared only with family. There was the real fear of losing not only his movements, but also the identity he had built with so much sacrifice. Ali never publicly admitted this, but those close to him knew. Each morning was a new round, each tremor a punch, each choked word a blow. Still, he never backed down. On the contrary, he began using his condition to draw attention to the disease, to inspire ordinary patients who, like him, faced the same invisible enemy. It was the beginning of a new phase in his life. He was no longer just the fighter who challenged the world in the ring. He was the man who showed the entire planet that greatness also reveals itself in vulnerability. By the end of that first chapter of his fight against Parkinson's, Ali had learned a lesson that would change everything. The disease could dominate his body, but it would never have power over his soul. He was no longer fighting just for himself. He was fighting for the eternal meaning of being Muhammad Ali. Parkinson's might weaken his muscles, but no disease could extinguish the fire that burned within him. As the years passed, Parkinson's began to take its toll on Muhammad Ali's body. What had previously been mild tremors now turned into difficulty walking, speaking, and even smiling. The entire world watched in shock as the man who was once called the most beautiful man on the planet transformed. Headlines no longer highlighted victories, belts, or provocative phrases, but rather his daily struggle with the disease. And yet, Ali refused to hide that at times. Event organizers were wary of showing him in public. They feared that the image of weakness would overshadow the champions. But Ali had a different perspective. He believed that every appearance was a way to inspire. He knew that by showing himself, he was telling millions of people, "You are not alone." It was a gesture of generosity, but also of courage, because for someone who had always been a symbol of vitality, showing vulnerability required more strength than facing any rival in the ring. A memorable scene from the 1990s. Ali was invited to a charity event. When he took the stage, his legs were shaking. The audience watched in silence. He trembled, but insisted on raising his arm and shaking hands. Amidst the general discomfort, someone applauded him. Soon the entire audience was on its feet, applauding. That simple yet immense gesture. Ali no longer needed punches to move the audience. His presence alone was a direct blow to the hearts of those watching. Behind the applause there were hard nights. The disease advanced relentlessly. Many friends drifted away, unable to cope with his fragility. But his family remained steadfast. It was there, in the warmth of his home, that Ali found the strength to carry on. He played with his children, laughed at his own difficulties, and transformed the weight of pain into moments of lightness. His wife recalled that, even on the worst days, he made a point of smiling and saying, "I'm still the same man. Only now, God has given me another fight." This belief that his illness had a greater purpose drove him. Ali began using his image to support Parkinson's research, give voice to forgotten patients, and break the silence surrounding the disease. He knew that every public appearance, even in his weakened state, had more impact than any speech. And indeed, his image, trembling in front of the cameras, became a global symbol of resilience. And then came the invitation that would change everything. The 1996 Atlanta Olympics were about to begin. The organizers wanted someone special to light the torch. The world didn't know it, but it was about to witness one of the most exciting moments in sports history. The chosen name, Muhammad Ali. The news was kept secret, but for him, it was like receiving the world championship belt again. Only this time, he wouldn't step into the ring to fight for himself. He would step into the ring to fight for eternal memory. That night, as the torch began its journey through the stadium, the crowd still didn't know who would be the last torchbearer. Tension mounted, the lights dimmed, and silence fell over the stadium. And then, amidst the darkness, a figure emerged. A man with trembling hands, a steady gaze, and a body scarred by illness. It was Ali. The stadium erupted in tears and applause. With each faltering step, he seemed to say to the entire world, "I'm still here." There he raised the torch with effort, but also with dignity. The fire illuminated not only the stadium, but millions of hearts. The image of his trembling hands, lighting the Olympic flame, became an eternal symbol of the human struggle against limitations. He wasn't just a sports champion who appeared there. He was a man who, even physically defeated, remained undefeated. In spirit, the fire that trembled in her hands was not weakness, it was courage. And that night, the whole world bowed before her. And you, what did you feel when you remembered that moment? If this scene touched you in any way, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your opinion in the comments. This way, more people will learn about this story that's not just about sports, but about the strength to face life head-on. The morning after the opening of the Atlanta Olympic Games, headlines around the world focused on a single protagonist. It wasn't the athletes competing, nor the colorful delegations parading in the ceremony. The name splashed across newspapers, magazines, and television news was one Muhammad Ali. The image of his trembling hands lighting the Olympic torch spread across the planet within hours. It was impossible not to be moved. That gesture, which could have been seen as fragile, had become the greatest symbol of strength ever broadcast live to billions of people. At the White House, Bill Clinton declared he had never witnessed anything so powerful at an Olympic opening ceremony. Religious and political leaders, and even Ali's historic rivals, sent messages of admiration. What had happened in Atlanta was not just a sporting ceremony, it was a moment of humanity that crossed borders, religions, and ideologies. For the first time, the world was not talking about the provocative champion, the man who defied the American government during the Vietnam War, but rather about a human being who faced his vulnerability head-on and transformed it into courage. The reactions weren't limited to the highest echelons of power. In the simplest homes, in hospitals, in rooms where patients struggled with similar illnesses, that scene became fuel for hope. Doctors reported that many Parkinson's patients, upon watching Ali on television, began to see their condition differently. If he can show himself, if he can face it, why can't I? They said. It was as if the Olympic flame had also ignited the courage of thousands of anonymous people across the planet. Ali, for his part, never forgot that night. He later confided that it was one of the most difficult and yet most momentous moments of his life. The tension of carrying the torch in front of billions of spectators terrified him. He feared falling, feared that his illness would betray him at the most crucial moment. But as he raised the torch and heard the entire stadium rise to its feet, he felt he was no longer alone. Each round of applause was like an invisible net supporting him, and in that moment he realized he was no longer just a retired boxer. He was a universal symbol of resilience. Over time, the scene became one of the most reproduced images in Olympic history, replayed in documentaries, remembered in commercials, studied in communications schools as an example of visual storytelling. Ali's image became immortal. To this day, when people talk about defining moments of the Olympics, that night in Atlanta ranks high, not for the brilliance of the spectacle, but for the intensity of the human truth it conveyed. But if for the audience the scene was the height of emotion, for Ali it was also the beginning of a new responsibility. He understood that, after Atlanta, the world saw him differently, no longer just as the greatest, but as someone who carried the flame of dignity amidst pain. This realization led him to take on an even greater role as a spokesperson for the fight against Parkinson's. If before he was a sports icon, now he was a messenger of hope. However, this new phase was not easy. The harassment increased, the pressure mounted, and his body continued to deteriorate. At public events, Ali needed support. His speeches were short, and the silences longer than ever, but his presence alone was enough to draw applause, tears, and bows. He no longer needed words. His very existence, even weakened, was a discourse more powerful than any oratory. The torch that Ali lit in Atlanta didn't just light up the stadium, it lit up hearts, and even when the flame went out, the echo of that fire continued to burn throughout the world. The mornings slowed down, the button on his shirt demanded patience. The cutlery felt heavier than a belt, and his breathing, once light, now had a rhythm reminiscent of a referee's count. In the mirror, Muhammad Ali stared not at a defeated man, but at a man who needed to relearn simple gestures, like someone relearning dance steps. Tremors came like waves, crashed, receded, and returned. "I'm still here," he said softly, almost like a mantra. He walked around the house, leaning his hand against the walls, measuring distances, negotiating with his body. At the table, he made fun of his own stumbles to disarm his children's fear. "Today the spoon wants to be a butterfly," he whispered, and their laughter became a shield. The pain didn't show itself, but lived there, and yet the choice repeated itself, to get up, to get dressed, to show his face to the world in public. Ali discovered the power of silence. When words failed, his gaze spoke volumes. A shy boy approached him during a hospital visit and held his trembling hand. "Champion, does it hurt?" He took a breath, squeezed back, and replied slowly, "Sometimes, but it passes. Courage remains." At events, when the audience held their breath watching him falter on his first step, he would give a wry smile and break the ice. "I promise I won't fall today." The laughter came, the tension melted away, and, without long speeches, the message came through. Dignity is not the absence of weakness, it's what you do with it. "I am not my illness," he repeated to reporters. "I am the same man who learned to get up after every fall." Fragility, there, didn't ask for pity. It asked for respect, and respect came with a standing ovation, like a final round applause. Behind the scenes, the struggle was more intense. There were days when stiffness locked his shoulders, nights when sleep wouldn't come, mornings when his body refused. The family became a corner of rest and a trench. They prayed together, told stories, and organized their schedules around their available energy. There, however, he continued to convert pain into purpose. Charity, auctions, visits to clinics, research campaigns. "If my face helps open doors, then open them all," he would say. In the rare long interviews, he spoke little, slowly, without embellishment. "Don't hide who I am," he urged photographers. "Show the truth." And the truth emerged. A trembling hand, a firm jaw, a man sitting as if holding an invisible torch. The courage lay not in overcoming the disease, but in not hiding. From it he understood. His body was no longer a weapon. It was a beacon. Over time, society began to see him beyond boxing. Murals in schools, phrases in notebooks, posters in doctors' offices, lessons in classrooms where a jab had never been practiced. Teachers used his story to talk about resilience, doctors about empathy, parents as an example. In old photos, Ali floated. In new ones, he remained. This remaining, quiet and whole, taught more than any knockout victory. "Losing speed gave me clarity," he once confided to his wife. "Now I see more people than applause." The faith that had always guided him became safe ground. He accepted help without shame, thanked with a look, and, when he could, returned it. With humor. If his hand trembled, he held it with the other. If his voice faltered, he let the silence speak. Ali seemed to say to the world, greatness doesn't end when strength runs out. It begins when strength runs out. When the body gave up dancing, Ali invented another rhythm and proved that there are victories that only exist in silence. After Atlanta, life took on a different rhythm. His body demanded long pauses, but the meaning of the path became even clearer. Muhammad Ali woke early, took a deep breath, and quietly repeated that the flame wasn't his alone. He visited hospitals, shook hands, and bowed his head as if recognizing brothers in arms. He didn't promise cures, he offered presence. In each white hallway, he left a simple gesture, a look that said, "I understand," a smile that wove courage. At home, he accepted help without shame, practicing small movements like someone rehearsing a new footwork. And when the tremors overcame him for a moment, he responded with humor. He learned to transform a fall into a pause into a message into shelter. All around, photographers and fans wanted the legend he offered the man. Fragile and luminous, he taught that dignity means remaining whole when the edges are frayed. The world waited for words. He gave silence. His pace became short, but the shadow grew longer, covering people struggling to get out of bed. There were days when the memory of Atlanta came back like a movie. The torch trembling overhead, the entire stadium sighing, and the flame streaking the darkness as if writing a promise. No one will be defined by their worst weakness. There he kept that scene like someone protecting an amulet, and began to carry it without hands, on his chest. When he visited a patient and couldn't find the words, he would simply close his eyes for a second and see the fire lit again. That image gave him breath, and the other, hope. At the same time, his body took its toll. Short steps, stubborn stiffness, fatigue that came early. He responded tenderly. He said that life, like boxing, is made up of rounds. Some lose, others draw, and some win by the simple act of staying. The torch didn't erase the pain, but it lit the way. Staying became an everyday verb, dressing slowly, sitting by the window, greeting neighbors, and listening to stories without haste. The world breathed in rhythm. Silence became a lesson. Trembling an invitation as the disease tightened its grip. The world seemed to shrink to the size of a quiet room. On the table were portraits of past fights, medals that glowed softly, and notes from fans folded like prayers. There he ran his fingers through the memories as if reading braille of his own destiny. The pain came in narrow waves, but faith opened windows. He asked for the curtains to be left ajar. He wanted to see the sky changing colors. He wanted to remember that time still breathed with him. Visitors arrived in murmurs, and the house learned to speak softly. No one needed speeches. It was enough to be. On certain days, his voice found a way and said, slowly, love strongly, forgive quickly, give thanks always. On others, silence did the job. The body, finally, gave in. The spirit did not. There he knew. The fight was not against death, but to allow life to fit fully into what was left. When the farewell arrived, It was not defeat. It was a belt. Those who loved him understood. Fire changed hands, not direction. Then, the images remained. The young man floating like a butterfly, the veteran raising the fire with trembling hands, the man sitting at the window measuring the sky. In all of them, the same message: greatness does not depend on the body that carries it. Atlanta became a silent, universal sermon. In classrooms, doctors show the scene to talk about empathy. In gyms, coaches remind us that courage is more than winning. In ordinary homes, families quietly repeat that it is possible to weather storms with our faces held high. The torch lit in 1996 did not stay in the stadium. It crossed borders, crossed decades, penetrated the skin of time, and when darkness visits someone, the memory reappears like a match in the dawn. If Ali could do it, so can I. It is not idolatry. It is a path. It is not mythology. It is daily practice, human, patient. It is the lesson that is lit every time courage needs a spark. In the end, the flame ceased to be a spectacle and became a mirror. Whoever looks at Ali sees the desire to continue. Completing this journey is understanding that Muhammad Ali didn't overcome Parkinson's with a miracle, nor did he lose to it with shame. He walked alongside the disease and chose, every day, which part of himself would be most visible. He chose courage, he chose tenderness, he chose respect for those who suffer. The Atlanta torch sums up his testament: trembling and fire in the same frame, limit and greatness in the same breath. When life gets narrow, remember this gesture: lifting what weighs down, even slowly, accepting help, even if it hurts, looking at the other, even without words. This is the champion's secret technique outside the ring. The world changes when someone shows their true colors in their most fragile hour. If there's darkness, light a spark. If there's no voice, lend a hand. And when the mirror asks who you are, answer with the brightness that doesn't flicker. Flame continues. This is how a man becomes more than a name. This is how an eternal icon is born. Ali demonstrated the move, being kind when everything weighs down. Time confirms and preserves the rest.